Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. Eileen Goldberg, I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. We'd like to thank you for attending Lean Leadership, How to Build a Healthy Project Team, which is sponsored by Procore this afternoon. There's a couple things I'd like to go over before we start our webinar. The first thing is this webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants and attendees. The second is this webinar is not available for CEUs, so we wanted to apologize for that, but unfortunately, as it is a sponsored webinar, AIA and the CM Lean program will not accept any continuing education units for this webinar. Also, you'll see the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a red arrow to the left of that box. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. You'll also notice the questions box at the bottom of that box. As we go through the presentation, as you have questions, please put them in the box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation, but we want to make sure you get those in as soon as you have them, so go ahead and put them in there. We'll also be doing a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation for those of you who are not familiar with the term. Pluses are things you liked about the presentation, you enjoyed, you thought we did well, you thought we explained well, and deltas are kind of like wishes, things you think we can change, things you thought we could have explained better, things you wish you would have talked about. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we really want to get that information from you. So again, just to recap, this presentation is being recorded, and a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants and attendees. This webinar is not available for CEUs because AIA and AGC will not accept those for a sponsored webinar. You'll see the red arrow to the left of the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. Be sure to put those questions and feedback, those plus deltas, in the questions box. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce Cousins from SWORD Integrated Building Solutions. Thanks, Bruce.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon in some parts of the country. I'm glad to have you here today, and we've got an exciting seminar, workshop, webinar. It's going to be a little short. I want to emphasize that there are going to be time for questions, so please, as Eileen just mentioned, type your questions in the question box. We'll get to those. We're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar today. We have a lot of attendees, and so we're going to leave about 15 minutes for everybody to ask. We'll get as many questions in as possible in that short period of time, but always feel free. We'll have my contact information at the end, and make sure you note that. And also I have a YouTube site where we have a lot of different content in there, and you're welcome to look at that. If you do look at that, please subscribe, and that'll tell me what the subject matters are that people are interested in, and it's a great way to get information out to people in this day and age that we're living in. All of us are, I'm sure, faced with all these new ways of learning and touching people and being on projects. I know I'm on a couple projects now that we're out of my area, but we're having to really work hard at making presentations that are remote and virtual and making them work for people. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is the idea of how we connect with people. We basically have, let me see if I can make this work. Yeah. So here's a little statement about what we're talking about today. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to include this in the notes when you get the PDF of the webinar, and it will be helpful if you have to describe it for people in your office and so on. Just kind of restates what we already stated in the introduction or in the invitation. So my background, just in general, quickly, I'm an architect, licensed registered architect. Been doing this kind of thing for 35 years. Well, a little 35 years plus. I hate to say that, but it's true. And was with Turner as a lean regional manager in Northern California. Prior to that, I was with the White's company as a BIM manager for the national BIM manager for them. And I've done a ton of projects all around the country over the years, both from a design side as a designer and owner of my own architecture firm. And then I've also taught at a variety of locations in the United States. So that's a bit about me. And in the last 10 years, I do want to make a quick note. We just lost one of our great leaders of lean thinking. I started doing this about 10 years ago, really as a trying to discover what we could do to improve construction and how we could make it a better how we could make it better for everyone in the process. And Greg Howell and Glenn Ballard, as you may or may not know, established the Lean Construction Institute, which is sponsoring this thing today. And they also were just lean thinkers and how they could improve specifically for construction, which was its own kind of animal, not manufacturing. And Greg Howell just passed away a couple weeks ago, and he really was the father of this thinking. And I just want to recognize him and say how much I learned from him and others in this process. We just really lost a great leader. So that's just a brief recognition of him and the value that he's added. It's become a worldwide, I don't know if some of you are from all over the world, in other parts of the world than the US, but it's become a worldwide movement and very, very valuable for construction in terms of improving the process for everyone, and not just for lowering costs or making things more efficient, but also making it a great thing to go to work every day and enjoy the work. Now we have a few questions we want to start off with, and certainly all of them are in the vein of what are your challenges, and so hopefully we can answer some of those today. So the first one here, Eileen's going to help me with this, is a little bit about why you're here.
So I've just launched the poll. Take the time to vote. Go ahead and let us know. The poll's being distributed at this time. So we're collecting responses. There seems to be a front runner here, but some others are catching up, Bruce. We're going to leave the poll open for another couple seconds, so be sure to get those votes in. We really want to know your thoughts on this so we can make sure that the webinar is exactly what you want to hear. We have about 60% of our audience that's voted, so go ahead and get those votes in. All right. Another couple seconds, everyone. Go ahead and get those votes in. Thanks so much. All right, I'm closing the poll. And Bruce, let me share these results with everyone. We had 75% that said, I want to learn ways to lead and motivate people to collaborate. 19% that said, I want my team to cultivate a learning environment. And 6% that said, I want to be a better team player.
Great. Well, that's a good indication. And we're going to talk a lot about leadership and motivation in the short time that we have today. And I want everyone to make sure that I've put the references in because I've learned a lot from many people, both my own practical experience, but also from the experience of a lot of people who are very much more knowledgeable in this area than I am. And certainly we can all learn from what they're up to. So thank you for that poll, and it's a good indication of where we are with the, and we'll try, and I was hoping that we would have a lot of leaders in the group today. Not that if you're a team member, you can still be a leader, by the way. But at the same time, I think that that's one of the things that we want to point out today is who are the people on the teams, and how do they fit in the process, and there we go. So let me see the next one. So lean in general, I don't want to go into a lot of detail. I'm sure that most of you are sort of familiar with the general idea of lean. If you're not, definitely check in with the Lean Construction Institute. There's a ton of information, a lot of learning that's published. So there's a couple areas that we focus in on, how to do the commercial agreements for a lean project. I know I'm working on one of those right now, and it's still just a standard design, build it, CM at risk type project, but we can do them with IPD or other things, other ways of doing the commercial agreement. The social part of it, the teamwork part, teaming and the culture of collaboration is the huge part, because one of the first tenets and the number one tenet of lean is respect for people. And we really focus in on that as a organization, and almost everything we do is about that. But at the same time, we also talk about productivity and the production and planning, which using the last planner system. We're doing a lot more now with TAC planning, and I've done a few seminars on that lately. Technology, of course, I started with BIM in 1993, so I've been doing that for a long time, and it's gotten better. We've learned a lot more. There's a ton of support for that, and then certainly just customer satisfaction. With the Lean Construction Institute, we don't just make a bunch of empty promises. We really survey people to find out what's important. So today, we're going to focus in on this idea, the idea of the social framework of lean and what that's all about. So one of my go-to guys for information and knowledge about teaming and teamwork is Patrick Lencioni. He came up with a few years ago this idea of overcoming some of the limitations of what are the things that create dysfunctional teams. And on the bottom here, you can see the absence of trust. Of course, members really must trust each other on an emotional level and are comfortable with sharing weaknesses, mistakes, and vulnerability, really. That's the first one on the bottom of that triangle. The next one up, of course, is the idea of conflict. Teams must really be not afraid to engage in a passionate debate and dialogue. They don't want to be isolated, you don't want them to be socially isolated. And in a good functioning team, people don't hesitate to disagree with each other, and all in the spirit really of making the best for the project and to agree on results. And so number 3 there, the lack of commitment. What we're looking for on good teams, achieving genuine buy-in around a group decisions, okay? There's politics involved in probably every team, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to help people understand and work out those differences. And when those values and differences can be worked out and we can align ourselves with our goals, it makes a real successful team. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then certainly team members must be accountable. And that's really what we really want to work on, these 2 top ones, focusing on the collective outcomes of ourselves and asking ourselves as a team, how are we doing? What are we doing on a frequent basis? In fact, that's why we do the plus deltas in our survey, is because we want to know what we're doing in terms of how we did and then how we can improve that process. The last one there, inattention to results. Teams that trust one another, really engage in conflict, commit to decisions, and hold each other accountable are able to focus almost exclusively on what's really best for the team and the project. I look back, I used to live in the Bay Area, and one of my favorite basketball teams, of course, and was the Golden State Warriors, and were very successful for a long time. And I think that's one of the things about the coach in that situation was he came into the team and was really able to pull together a bunch of individuals that were oftentimes egotistical, challenged, very successful in their own right, and put them on a team. And that's really what we're looking for here. We're looking for that kind of capability in our project teams. And again, I'm dashing over this very quickly, but Lencioni has some great books. Another one, the next one that he has, which I think is very powerful, he's come up with this idea of a healthy team. And one of the things about a healthy team is we really want to know, we're going to talk about the behavior of a team, right? It's not just about the technical stuff. Pretty much everybody who's coming to a project is technically focused and is really technically competent and so on, and has a general way of doing things. But what we want to do are start to look at the healthy aspects of a team and what that means to the project itself. And this can be, I call it, the elephant in the room, because oftentimes people in this engineering, technical side, architecture, feel like they're technically competent and don't really need this level of focus on the behavioral or social aspects of a project. And so in the beginning, on the onboarding side, excuse me, that's one of the things that we're really focused in on, is the idea of how to onboard with teams, because we're required to come together very quickly. And by coming together, we can't just assume that everybody knows what we all hope they will know. We need to understand that. We need to discuss it. We need to be clear. And so one of the things about planning a project as you get off in the beginning, you need to begin to talk about what each individual on that team is going to do. And we talk about some ways of doing that. You can do a Myers-Briggs, or you can do different surveys that will allow you to clearly identify the actual personality types you have. There might be somebody, for example, that likes to sit back and relax, and not relax, but is thinking about things and takes time to really process something a lot longer than a lot of other people. And but at the same time, really might have a huge amount of input. And so we want to make sure that we understand that those people are not just causing slowing down or not available. They're basically processing in a different way than others. And so we really look at this idea, the behavioral side. And a lot of times with new teams, it's really a challenge. We have to understand that people make mistakes. They have strengths and weaknesses. And in a traditional project approach, which is command and control, technical people sort of think, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's how to do it. And then they focus in on it, and okay, you're not meeting this and not meeting that. And so that person may be dismissed in terms of their actual participation in the team and may be marginalized, and they may have a ton of information and things to say. In a lean environment, we look not at the individual, we really look at the system, and we ask how we can improve the process and get the team up to speed quickly, but how we can really improve getting as much input. I always say that no one knows as much as everyone. And I think, especially as you get into projects with IPD and more collaborative type projects, we really learn from others, and we need to do that quickly. So here comes another question. I'll jump here to one more question, and we'll another question, actually, not one. So let's go ahead and do this survey quickly.
So which statement is true, everyone? Team members need a shared understanding of project goals. Teams need to avoid conflict and dissent throughout a project. To you, which one is the most true? And again, we have a pretty big front runner here, Bruce. I think it's going to be an interesting poll. We've got a lot of votes coming in pretty quickly. I also want to remind people, if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the questions box. We'll go ahead and answer those at the end of the presentation. And be thinking of that feedback as that comes through as well. We're going to leave the poll open for another couple seconds, so be sure to get those votes in. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this one, and I'll share the results with everyone. So Bruce, it turns out that 96% of our attendees said team members need a shared understanding of project goals, and 4% said teams need to avoid conflict and dissent throughout a project.
All right, well, that's exactly what we had hoped. And I think it reinforces that idea that that we're trying to avoid the idea of not having conflict. We're trying to avoid we're trying to minimize conflict. We don't want that to happen because we want people to communicate with each other in a productive way. So that's good. Thank you. And especially now, this next slide, we're talking about how people, this concept of collaboration has replaced autonomy. So much in the past was, okay, I'm the expert, I'll go do my thing. Then I'll come back and I'll tell everybody, and it's really becomes a fait accompli in terms of that person's input into the process. And what we found over my last 10 years and 12 years of doing lean and lean project management for IPD projects, for not IPD projects, for IPD light projects, whatever the combinations have been basically that if we open up the ideas to everybody on the team, we get a tremendous amount, a better, higher quality of information, things that we wouldn't have thought about. We're breaking down silos. We're really communicating, and the good news is that we can motivate people better at a higher level to participate and at the same time do better work. And that's why I say we're going to go from create the A team, because we don't, on a lot of projects, we don't just start off with the A team. There's a lot of different skill levels. There's a lot of different experience and so on and so forth. So we want to basically bring that up as we can as the project proceeds. And that's where this idea of collaboration has come into effect. And a lot of these things are done, as you see in these images. These are actual images from my projects over the years, some both on the design side there. That was a hospital, and the next one over on the right is actually a Google project for their new office, their headquarters out in the Bay Area. And then a hospital project on the bottom there in one of the trailers when I was with Turner. So there's a lot of idea. The important idea, of course, to take away from this is that we're really getting away from that old individualism approach. And again, this is another project. It's a classic. I love this one because this guy, his name is Davey. And Davey was the vertical construction in our self-performed concrete group. And it was the first time he got to get up and describe what he needed and the information. And before he actually got up on the core, for example, and was putting steel in and doing all kinds of stuff way up on there with his team in the middle of winter, let's say. And that's exactly so. So again, just to re-emphasize that the idea with the teams now is that there's a lot more input from people, from all different kinds of people in all different kinds of ways. And one of the things that's important about that, I've just heard about this from one of my teams that I'm working on now, is we always emphasize the idea of go slow to go fast, right? Because I think there's always a concern, well, we're not really going, we're getting too much information, and so on. So we emphasize that. And again, as you see here, it's a collaborative approach, and there's a lot of team members and so forth. So this whole idea of behavior and teaming, and the idea of the elephant in the room behavior, talking about it, we can technically do a lot of these things, but we really need to continue to improve our skills at collaborating with other people on these project teams. And one of the things now, I just heard this at the last Congress, one of the better presentations I saw at the last Lean Construction Congress, which was last year, was the idea of we're not selecting people correctly. So if we want to go clear back at the beginning of our approach to a project, how are we selecting people? And there's a great little book I'll talk about in a minute that was authored by one of our Lean Construction Institute contributors, Bill Seed, a very experienced guy who has done has contributed a great deal to this end of the project in selecting teams and so forth. So I'm going to tell you that reference in a minute. But the idea is that basically so many of our RFPs and traditional RFPs are really not asking the right questions. And especially I'm just working now with the National Park Service. We're at many public agencies now. I think I would look very carefully at how you're selecting your project teams. If you're on this webinar, you want to begin to even think hard about how we can do that. And my suggestion, and certainly I learned this from Bill, is that you really want to look at the traits that are most important for successful collaboration. And some of these here you can see technical skills, certainly, but humility is another idea. And some of these questions that we may ask in interviews, we need to figure out better ways to ask these questions when our project teams are being interviewed. And we also need to be able to explain these to our potential customers and clients in a better way. You know, I think that highlighting these ideas, even if you're not asked about them, I think you can bring them into your responses when you're responding to a request for qualifications or an RFP. And this is really at the headwaters of beginning to get a project team to go together and be collaborative throughout the process, because you're thinking about it in the earliest times. And then this is Bill's book, and it's you can get it through the Lean Construction Institute if you go to the website. If some of you are not members, but you can still go on there and purchase this book. And he goes into very great detail about these things that we don't have time to do here today. But I think importantly, he's characterized it in a few categories that really help identify these traits in a matrix basis that you can go through and weight when you're interviewing your teams. And so, sort of a few questions that I think are quickly just a kind of an overview of a few questions that might be helpful when we want to identify traits, either interviewing project teams, interviewing trade partners. There's just a lot of ways that you can use this approach and be thinking about it. Let's say you're in the design side. How can the design team better support the construction team? What is your definition of target value design? Well, maybe I don't know that, so maybe we need to go look that up or figure that out. I know a lot of people used to come to interviews, and we used to do a lot of responses for interviews, and a lot of times people really didn't know what they were talking about, and the clients could figure that out pretty quickly. And that in our world has changed radically in the last 10 years, because people have gotten more experienced in understanding what people know, either about BIM, about Lean, about these processes that we're talking about today. And there's just a few which I won't go into all of them right this minute, but that's a good thing to begin thinking about. Pick up this book, start looking through, maybe rethinking about how you're interviewing your project teams. It's not just about low cost anymore, certainly, and most of us know that, but it's really about best value. And so here we go, our final questionnaire. So let's quickly jump on this one, and we'll carry on. Thank you, Eileen.
I was on mute, of course, absolutely. All right, the poll's being distributed right now, and we're going to start collecting responses. Looks like we always have a front runner on these, Bruce. I can't tell if that's a good thing or not. You'll have to tell me.
Well, they're not supposed to be hard. We try to get them so that they're straightforward, and there's one that stands out better than others.
Well, that's good. Okay, fantastic. So we have about half of our attendees that have voted. Let's go ahead and see how many more we can get in. We're going to leave this open for a couple more seconds, so be sure to get those votes in for us. Okay. All right. Oh, we've got them coming in at a fast rate here. They know when I'm going to close them, so they're just coming in. All right, we'll leave it open for a couple more seconds for everyone. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this poll, and I'm going to share the results with everyone. So Bruce, we had 67% that said, I think the biggest barrier to lean transformation is trust. 31% that said, I think leadership skills can be taught. And 1% said, I set timelines that are unchangeable and then reset.
All right, interesting. So the first one I want to say is really out of a book that is leadership book, and I'll put that in the content at the end here. But and I've got to pronounce her name right, B'nai B'rith, and I always pronounce it incorrectly. But she's got a couple great books on leadership, and I think this is one of them that she talks a lot about, is how we manage ourselves in leadership positions. The other question about trust is absolutely, I'd say, having done this poll many times and discussed it with teams and so on and so forth, trust is always the key thing. And the thing about trust, to me, that sort of makes trust work, and I'll talk a little bit about this more in more depth in a minute, but is humility. And the idea of humility and vulnerability. The best leaders really have those characteristics. It's not about what you learn in the book. It's not about your technical skills always. It's really about a few key ideas. And if you can practice those ideas with your project teams and create what we call
Bruce, your audio just went out. So can you try to, okay, we're going to change. There we go. That's much better. I don't know if that was the reason or what, but
headphones.
Nope, that didn't help. Bruce, your audio is still not working.
No, it's still not working.
We can hear me, but not you.
Sorry. Let's see here. Better?
It is now. Yep. I think they just needed to be shaken up a little bit.
All right. All right.
Thank you so much.
And I apologize. Sorry. So we'll. So here we go. Here we were. We were talking about our next slide, which is basically a person that's done a great deal of work in this area, and I really have a great deal of respect for, is Amy Edmondson. And her book here, Teaming, if you haven't seen it, have a look at that. It's really, and she also has this on audiobooks. So it's really a great introduction, and very useful in terms of valuable in terms of understanding and learning how we do teaming in projects. And one of the key things that she mentions, which I think we talked, it got a second in our poll, is that teaming has to be learned. It just goes beyond, teaming goes beyond old style partnering. And it's really more about understanding interpersonal skills, negotiating disagreements, overcoming challenges. Teaming really it's very self-conscious, and the traditional what we call push systems or command and control systems really don't offer that very much. That's a hierarchical system. It's top down, and in the lean world, we are bottom up. We think we want to hear from everyone and so on. We want to, as I said earlier, we want to look first at the system, not at the people, and then we want to see how we can improve the system.
Bruce, your audio went out again. Can you shake your headphones a little bit? All right, let's try a different set. All right, let's see what happens. My apologies for the technical difficulties, everyone. It is 2020.
How are we doing?
Anyone? Perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay. That's not what you need. Does this work? Test?
Yes, it does.
Let me see if I can.
Bruce, that worked just fine.
Oh, that worked? Oh,
yes, it did. It worked just fine. Sorry. We lost your PowerPoint, but that worked just fine. There it is.
There we go. Back with the PowerPoint. All right, I'm going to keep going. I basically need to. Okay. Okay, so let's see. So I can't hear you, but you can hear me, I assume. So I'm going to keep going. This idea of psychological safety was huge. Google did a survey called by Project Aristotle, which basically they called it Project Aristotle, which basically ended up being a program where they surveyed the best teams, the most successful teams, and they basically came up with this idea of psychological safety. The teams that had psychological safety were the most successful in general. And so that's what we're trying to work on in terms of our projects. And here's a few things that the psychological safety oftentimes is really taken for granted. We need to really make sure that it's included in our projects, and that people can feel comfortable in a project, and people can be vulnerable, people can make mistakes, and as I said, they have different strengths and weaknesses. These are huge, important ideas, very challenging to people who are more technically focused. But what we really want to do in our projects today, as I've discussed, is to try and create a personal connection on every project, and with these features. The idea of building a personal connection can be done many different ways, and I'll just quickly say that we really can have groups, team activities, team building. We can do, as I said earlier, behavioral profiling like Myers-Briggs, strengths analysis from different, there's a variety of different surveys and so forth to do that. And then really ways and casual settings for people to get to know each other. And these seem basically pretty straightforward, but what we really try to do is we really need to emphasize them again. We need to give prizes when people do good things. we can make that a very exciting thing. And the one thing I always say is people who dine together actually work together very well. So you can do simple things that really make a huge difference in terms of creating this personal connection. So now I want to just quickly, I have 3 characteristics of highly collaborative teams that I put together here. And these when we talk about collaboration, we look at collaboration and the idea of leveraging behavior and relationships to achieve greater outcomes. When we're working together, we want to begin to understand first our shared purpose and vision. And to understand the shared purpose and vision, we really can look at a way to do that through engaging the team in a purpose. I know DPR does this a lot on all their projects. We used to do it at Turner in some projects, not all, but I've tended to really try to work on this. We're doing a project for the National Park Service, as I mentioned a minute ago. And in that project, we talked about what the National Park Service's mission is, how they're, in this project is a 1934 building that's being renovated. With the whole team, we're talking about how that really has been a benefit to the whole neighborhood and community, and people begin to buy into it. On another project, in a hospital project, the doctors would come in and talk to the project team. So we want to really look at this idea of a shared purpose. In other words, from day one, and engage the team, not just the project team, but the executive team, everybody involved, and really understand how that's been shaped, and especially how it influences decision making. And then a clear plan. A clear plan builds on the foundation of the purposes of a clear purpose and vision, and it really helps the team reinforce the focus of why and not what of the project. The plan goal should ensure all members of the project team to understand what are the steps to achieve the process. We've actually done what we call the project playbook. We put those together for the teams. A very important idea of explaining, if you're doing Last Planner, what Last Planner is, doing a workshop on Last Planner if people don't know about it, helping people along, helping people admit that they don't know about it. That's probably as important as anything. And then how the incremental successes of what is progress, what are the metrics of a project, what are we looking for, what are the accountability in the project, and so on. So here again, we have a few steps. How do we achieve these kinds of things? How do we assign roles that fit each person's strength? What are the ways of an agile participation or a scrum participation? All the kinds of things that we're doing, but we're explaining them in detail so people who haven't been familiar with that approach actually understand it and feel comfortable about proceeding with something that they may be less experienced with or vulnerable, feeling vulnerable with. And then the next one, of course, is overall team engagement. As I said a minute ago, team members really need to experience a personal connection, and it's important to build that in ways that you can, as I mentioned earlier, with the idea of eating together, dining together, doing behavioral profiling. That one thing I didn't mention was the Gallup Strengths Finder, they call it Clifton Strengths Finder, I think now, which is a survey, Myers-Briggs. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there, but are really valuable in terms of really getting to know people at a very micro level. And what we've done in past projects, I don't have a picture of it here, but we actually put up those survey results on the wall in the big room or in the trailer. as we're making decisions, so people can kind of get an idea of who's who and what's going on. We've asked a lot of people if they feel comfortable asking those kinds of questions, and most people say yes, they do feel comfortable, but there still is somewhat resistance to the idea of being personal on a project, and you may have some questions about this. But you can create what I call experimental team building activities where somebody might not do so well at it, and that actually helps people understand. Like the head of the project might be terrible at it, but they're really good at other things. And what we do is then begin to realize that vulnerability. So there are things that actually can go wrong out of those three things. What can go wrong? We look at it. There are things you want to be aware of. And again, I don't have a ton of time to go over that here now. But the idea of that a lot of times in cross-functional teams, somebody's threatened. So what we need to do, and this sounds very touchy-feely, and it is in a way, and Lencioni talks a lot about how to facilitate this in his book, the Toyota Way. In his book about the field guide to team building, and so they really want to create these defensive behaviors. You want to try to understand them, where they go, how we can get rid of them, and really assess how each person might perceive that they're being threatened in a situation. So things can go wrong. It's not always perfect, but at the same time, we like to think that if we're thinking about them, we're working on it. That's another thing, for example, that brings it up in a plus delta if you do plus deltas frequently, which is another lean tool, lean technology, a lean technique that we use. So that's the quick and down and dirty of teaming and lean interaction and so on. My contact information is here. When you get the PDF of this presentation, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I actually am now living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I have historically been in either Denver or Oakland, but as I said, I created a YouTube channel that you should go to and check out. We do a lot of field ideas, some success stories, things like that. So that's it for me. Let's take some questions now and move on.
Bruce, can you hear me?
And I'm going to try to reattach my headphones here 1 second, and so I can hear everybody.
Okay, Bruce, can you hear me now?
And you're talking, and I can't hear you.
I am talking right now. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking and let me know if you can hear me.
Okay.
Okay, are we good?
Mm-hmm.
How about now? Is this good? Can you hear me?
Okay.
All right. So you can hear me now?
How are we doing?
Okay, so you can hear me now, we're good?
Yes, Eileen.
Yes. Okay, so we are going through a couple questions here. The first one is, Bruce, can you talk about abuse from managers inside work? A lot of managers are not qualified, and
Okay.
how can you stop that?
Now,
Such as, oh, we're good now. Okay, so should I re-ask the question? Bruce? Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Bruce? I apologize for the technical difficulties, everybody. What will happen if we can't get Bruce on board for these questions? What we're going to do is we're going to send him, and I will be sending out the slides and the recording for the presentation. But what we'll do is we'll send Bruce a copy of the questions in an Excel format. He will answer them, and then I'll send them out to everybody after he does. So Bruce, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Oh, you've never been so happy to hear my voice. All right, let's go ahead. I was telling people that if for some reason this happens again, that I'll send you an Excel file of the questions. You'll be able to answer them, and then I'll send them out to everybody.
And I can look, yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so for
Can you hear
now,
me?
let's say, can you talk about abuse from managers inside work, such as shouting, bad behavior, and complaining instead of using their potentials?
Ooh, that's the old world, right? We don't have any of those anymore. Um,
And how can you
yeah, I
stop
mean,
that was the actual question.
I, yeah, I totally get it. I think that there is a kind of a lingering command and control mentality in lots of firms that is a challenge, and I think I'm not sure I have a real simple answer for that, but I suppose if we refer to some of the books that I was talking about, um, they have some really good examples of that kind of negativity um, and how that can be overcome. And I think of especially Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. She has a couple chapters on that exact topic that I would recommend.
Okay, our next question is how do we encourage people, teams, developers to allow for team building exercises in schedules and budgets? How do we create highly collaborative teams when our processes are heavily driven by cost and timeline of the project?
Similar answer in a way, because that's the old world. We've done projects and even public agencies. You just have to build it in, explain why it's a value. Um, in some cases, it won't happen. In other cases, if you give people a chance, we oftentimes, most importantly, I think, with project teams, bringing the owner to the meetings to understand what's happening is the most important thing. It doesn't cost any more, to be honest with you. It's based on the old idea of, and the not old idea, but the idea that I mentioned earlier about go slow to go fast. Planning a project and having a good input from people. I know that's one of the things that is a constant kind of complaint. We got to hit the ground running. We got to be full speed ahead and so on and so forth. But we've seen in many, many cases, this front end investment is really what's going to make a project team work, and the front end investment is going to make a project better ultimately. So.
Okay, I want to remind people this is a great time to put in your plus deltas. We understand that a huge delta is our technical difficulties, but we also want to hear the things that you really enjoyed about our webinar. So go ahead and put those into the questions box as well. Our next question, Bruce, is who is best suited to be the responsible party for proposing and implementing the shared purpose idea, and what does that look like?
I think the responsible party, we just did this again recently, and the shared purpose is really the owner or the project manager. I mean, the senior person. We always ask for what is the mission. We create a mission statement. And I've done this on projects for years, the last 10 or so years specifically, where we spend a lot of time with those who either own or run the project. With Google, for example, we wanted the key guys to come in and tell us what their mission and their purpose was. On a project we're doing now with Park Service, we wanted the head of the head manager, project manager for our project, to tell us his mission and statement, and that turned out to be fantastic, and that's benefited. So it really is that. You can have sort of sub missions, smaller missions, but just putting the mission statement, and don't make them too complex. That's another thing. Make them a sentence or a couple sentences. It really keeps the team on track and understanding what the true mission of the project is.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Our next question is how do BIM technologies factor into highly collaborative teams, training, collaborative modeling, etc.?
Ooh, I love this one. I've always been a BIM guy, and BIM basically takes the subjectiveness out of discussions, meaning that when you see something, basically it's not a subjective decision. It's basically a collaborative decision. Um, so, so BIM, by having something visual, by having a visual process involved, really, we've said from beginning to end, really adds huge amount of ability to collaborate, to make quicker decisions, to improve schedules, to do all kinds of things in the BIM side, but also the lean side. How do you make that productivity better with project teams? And as I said before, I keep going back to this term, go slow to go fast. With BIM, we can start to really look into things and make decisions. I want to point out that there's one group, well, there are a couple different BIM. We use one of them that I really like now is called Plannerly, and that's an excellent, it's a mix of BIM and Lean together, and it's a good template for starting off a project. We've just done that recently with one of these projects I was talking about. And another, the Massport process in Boston, and the Boston, they own and manage all of the airports, a ton of different, anything related to ports in the Boston area. They put together a very important document combining BIM and Lean together. It's one of the best I've seen in the country.
Okay. Our next question is, how can a firm which does not currently employ Lean principles start learning and implementing these strategies?
That's a great one. Okay, so what we're doing really with Lean is we call it non-traditional delivery, right? So we're going to really start learning. We want to create what we would call a learning environment. And by creating a learning environment, we're asking people, what are they dissatisfied with their traditional environment? And how can they improve it? And that's kind of the beginning of it, is you're asking a variety of questions in the beginning. Most people, we usually typically in a workshop can go around the room and we get, 50 people in a room and we can find 50 different answers about what they are dissatisfied with. And so then the next question is, how can we begin to improve that? Well, the Lean Construction Institute, coaches like myself, other people have gone through this process with what we'll call traditional push planning type projects, push planning environments. And we basically have a lot of different skill sets, a lot of ways to look at problems and understand it. And it's something that takes commitment. It's not an easy thing to do. If you go to my website, sword.com, swordbuild.com, no, I'm sorry, sword.build. We don't do com anymore. There's a kind of a hierarchy that it shows the kind of level of skills that you get to communicate that.
Okay, in your opinion, what is the difference between lean thinking and systems thinking?
Well, there's a lot of systems thinking in Lean, let's put it that way. There used to be a concept called TQM, Total Quality Management. That didn't work too well for construction. A lot of the things that we do in Lean are very specifically focused on the construction environment and culture. And the reason that happens, because that TQM thing was, and also black belts, green belts, etc. A lot of those things are focused on manufacturing. And to me, construction is a very different manufacturing world. It is manufacturing, but there's many, many different conditions that make it a different place, a different animal. And so one of the things that we look at is how we can bring and that's where the Lean Construction Institute comes in. is in every Congress we have or convention, the Lean Design Forum, if you're an architect, as I am, we talk a lot about the ways that is different and how we can begin to really introduce that into our projects, into our teams, into our culture at our offices and our management group managers. So there's a lot of things that you can do to kick it off. Just ask small questions. There's a book out there that was really a very popular book called 2-Second Lean. And that book, tiny little book, it's a PDF type book. But those kind of things you can find. There's a ton of literature. Yeah. And really, again, I keep emphasizing the idea of Lean Construction or the Lean Construction Institute, which we've grown. When I first used to go there, we had 250 people at a meeting. Now we're getting 1,500 to 2,000 people coming to our Lean Congress every fall. We have some phenomenal presentations by experienced people. It's one of the best experiences you'll ever undertake if you're just getting started in this process.
Well, I want to thank everyone for attending. We are out of time. We do have some questions that weren't answered. As I mentioned before, I'm going to give them to Bruce in an Excel format. He will answer them, send them back to me, and I will. Bruce, congratulations. You've been voluntold. He's going to answer them and send them back to me, and I will send them out to everyone so they will have the answers to the questions. So LCI would like to thank Bruce Cousins from Sword Integrated Building Solutions for presenting our webinar, Procore for sponsoring our webinar today, and all of you for attending our webinar. We hope you have a fantastic weekend and all stay safe. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.